Chapter 19. The Hunt for the Invisible Man. Kemp took some time to explain to Colonel Adie what had happened. "He's mad," said Kemp, "and evil. He thinks of nothing but his own advantage, his own safety. I've listened this morning to a terrible story of cruelty and pride. He has wounded men. He'll kill them unless we can prevent him. He plans to rule by terror. Nothing can stop him. He's loose outside there now, and he's mad."
"He must be caught," said Adie. "That's certain."
"But how?" cried Kemp, and suddenly became full of ideas. "You must begin immediately. You must set every man to work. You must prevent him leaving this place. If he gets away, he may go through the country, killing as he goes. The only thing that may keep him here is the thought of finding some books which he values very much. I will tell you about them. There is a man in your police station. Marvel."
"I know," said Adie. "I know. Those books, yes. But the Invisible Man
says he hasn't got them, but he thinks Marvel has. Now, listen. You must prevent him from eating or sleeping. Day and night the country must be on the watch for him. Food must be locked up, all food, so that he will have to break into a house or shop to get it. The houses everywhere must be shut against him. For 20 miles round Port Burdock, the whole country must begin hunting and keep on hunting. I tell you, Adie, he's dangerous. Unless he's caught, it's terrible to think of the things that may happen."
"Come along," said Colonel Adie. "Tell me as we go. What else is there we can do?"
In another moment, Adie was leading the way downstairs. They found the front door open, and the policeman standing outside staring at empty air.
"He's got away, sir," said one. "We must tell the police station at once," said Adie. "One of you must go down and report, and then come up and meet us, quickly. And now, Kemp, what else?"
"Dogs," said Kemp. "Get dogs. They don't see him, but they smell him. Get dogs."
"Good," said Adie. "We have no suitable dogs, but the prison officers over at Halstead know a man with bloodhounds. What else?"
"Remember," said Kemp, "his food shows. You can see it for some time after he has eaten it, so he has to hide. You must keep on searching in every quiet corner, and put away all weapons, and everything that might be a weapon. He can't carry such things for long. You must hide anything he can pick up and strike men with."
"Good again," said Adie. "We'll find him yet."
"And the roads," said Kemp, and hesitated.
"Yes," said Adie.
"Broken glass," said Kemp. "It's cruel, I know, but think of what he may do." Adie drew the air in between his teeth sharply.
"It's cruel. I don't perhaps think we should. But I'll have some broken glass ready. If he is killed, it will be only what he deserves."
"The man is mad, I tell you," said Kemp. "He will do anything. We must catch him by any possible means. He has cut himself off from the human race." Chapter 20. The Wicksteed Murder. The Invisible Man seems to have rushed out of Kemp's house in blind anger. A little child playing near Kemp's gateway was violently picked up and thrown to one side, so that his leg was broken, and then for some hours the Invisible Man disappeared completely. No one knows where he went or what he did, but we can think of him hurrying through the hot June morning, up the hill and onto the open land behind Port Burdock, and hiding at last in the woods. There he hid for 2 hours, while a growing crowd of men was hunting him across the country with dogs, and searching for him in every direction. In the morning, he had still been just a story, a terror. In the afternoon, mainly because of Kemp's story, he was shown to be a real enemy who had to be caught and held by force, and the countryside began organizing itself very quickly. Before 2 o'clock, he might still have escaped from the area by boarding a train. But after 2, that became impossible. Every passenger train between Southampton, Winchester, Brighton and Horsham travelled with locked doors, and the goods trains were almost entirely stopped. And in a great circle of 20 miles round Port Burdock, men armed with guns and sticks were soon setting out in groups of 3 and 4 with dogs to search the roads and fields. Police on horseback followed the country roads, stopping at every house and warning people to lock their doors and not to go out unless they were armed. All the schools had closed before 3 o'clock, and the frightened children, keeping together in groups, hurried home. A notice written by Kemp was put up everywhere, telling people clearly what must be done, that the invisible man must have neither food nor sleep, that a continuous watch must be kept for signs of him. Before night, the whole country was on guard, and also before night came news of the murder of Mr. Wicksteed. Somewhere on the road, the invisible man must have picked up an iron bar. Mr. Wicksteed, a quiet, harmless man on his way home from work, had, no doubt, seen an iron bar walking by itself, and had turned to follow it. Perhaps the invisible man imagined he was one of the hunters. We only know that he stopped quiet little Mr. Wicksteed, attacked him, broke his arm, knocked him down, and beat his head to pieces. Then there is the story of a voice heard by some men in a field, laughing and crying. Across the field it went and was lost. The invisible man must have seen the use Kemp had made of his story. He must have found all the houses shut and locked, and seen the groups of men with dogs watching. He knew that he was a hunted man. In the night he must have eaten and slept, for on the last morning he was himself again, and ready for his struggle against the world. Chapter 21. The Attack on Kemp's House. Kemp was reading a strange letter, written in pencil on a dirty sheet of paper. "You have been very clever, though what you gain by it I cannot think. You are against me. For a whole day you have hunted me. You have tried to rob me of a night's rest. But I have had food. I have slept, and we are only beginning. We are only beginning. There is nothing to be done but to start the terror. This is the first day of the terror. Port Burdock is no longer under the Queen. Tell your police and the rest of them it is under me, the Terror. I am Invisible Man the First. We shall begin with the death of a man named Kemp. He will die today. He may hide himself away and collect guards around him. Death, the unseen death, is coming. The game begins. Death starts. If you help him, my people, death may fall on you too. Today, Kemp is to die." Kemp read this letter twice. "That's his voice," he said, "and he means it." He got up slowly, leaving his lunch unfinished. The letter had come by the 1 o'clock post, and went into his study. He rang the bell for his servant and told her to go round the house immediately and see that all the windows were shut. He closed the study windows himself. From a locked drawer in his bedroom, he took a little revolver, examined it carefully, and put it into his pocket. He wrote a number of short notes, one to Colonel Leigh, and gave them to his servant to take. "There is no danger to you," he said. He thought for a time, and then returned to his meal. Finally, he struck the table. "We will have him," he said. "He'll go too far." He went up to his room, carefully shutting every door after him. "It's a game," he said. "A strange game. But I shall win, Mr. Griffin," he said. He stood at the window, staring at the hot hillside. He must get food every day. Did he really sleep last night? Out in the open somewhere. I wish we could get some good, cold, wet weather instead of the heat. He may be watching me now. He went close to the window. Something hit the wall above the window. "I'm getting worried," said Kemp. But it was 5 minutes before he went to the window again. "It must have been a bird," he said. Soon he heard the front doorbell ringing and hurried downstairs. He unchained and unlocked the door and opened it without showing himself. It was Adie. "Your servant's been attacked, Kemp," he said round the door. "What?" exclaimed Kemp. "She had that note of yours taken away from her. He's very near. Let me in." Kemp opened the door a few inches, and Adie came in. He stood in the hall, looking at Kemp locking the door. Kemp swore. "What a fool I was," he said. "I might have known already." "What's the matter?" said Adie. "Look here," said Kemp, and led the way towards his study. He handed Adie the Invisible Man's letter. Adie read it. "And you?" said Adie. The sound of a breaking window came from upstairs. Adie saw the little revolver half out of Kemp's pocket. "It's a window upstairs," said Kemp, and led the way up. There came a second noise while they were still on the staircase. When they reached the study, they found 2 of the 3 windows broken, the floor covered with broken glass, and one big stone lying on the writing table. The 2 men stopped in the doorway. Kemp swore again, and as he did so, the 3rd window broke with a crack like a gunshot, and the broken glass fell into the room. "What's this for?" said Adie. "It's beginning," said Kemp. "There's no way of climbing up here." "Not even for a cat," said Kemp. Stones came flying in, and then it sounded as if someone was banging on the windows downstairs. The 2 men stood outside the study, not knowing what to do. "I know," said Adie. "Let me have a stick or something, and I'll go down to the station and get the man with the bloodhounds. They'll find him." Another window broke. "You haven't got a revolver?" asked Adie. Kemp's hand went to his pocket. Then he paused. "I haven't one. At least, none that I want to part with." "I'll bring it back," said Adie. "You'll be safe here." Kemp gave him the weapon. "Now for the door," said Adie. As they stood waiting in the hall, they heard one of the bedroom windows crack. Kemp went to the door and began to turn the key as silently as he could. His face was a little paler than usual. "You must step straight out," he said. In another moment, Adie was on the doorstep and the door was shut. He waited for a moment, feeling more comfortable with his back against the door. Then he marched down the steps. He crossed the grass and had almost reached the gate when something moved near him. "Stop a bit," said a voice, and Adie stopped, with his hand on the revolver. "Well?" said Adie. "Please go back to the house," said the voice. "No," said Adie. He thought of trying a shot in the direction of the voice. "What are you going to do?" said the voice. "What I do is my own business," said Adie. The words were still on his lips when an arm came round his neck. He felt a knee in his back, and his head was forced backward. He fired the gun wildly, and in another moment he was struck in the mouth, and the weapon was taken from his hand. He tried to struggle, and was thrown on his back. "You devil!" said Adie. The voice laughed. "I would kill you now, if it wasn't a waste of a shot," it said. Adie saw the revolver in the air, 6 feet off, pointing at him. "Well?" said Adie, sitting up. "Get up," said the voice. Adie stood up. "Stand still," said the voice, and then firmly, "Don't try any tricks. Remember, I can see your face if you can't see mine.
You've got to go back to the house." "He won't let me in," said Adie.
"That's a pity," said the Invisible Man. "It isn't you I want to kill." Adie glanced away from the revolver and saw the sea far off, very blue and dark under the bright sun. He saw the smooth green hill, the white rocks of the coast, and the spreading town, and suddenly he knew that life was very sweet. His eyes came back to this little metal thing hanging between heaven and earth, 6 feet away.
"What must I do?" he asked.
"What must I do?" asked the Invisible Man. "If I let you go, you'll get help. The only thing is for you to go back to the house."
"I'll try. If he lets me in, will you promise not to charge the door?"
"I don't want to fight you," said the voice.
Kemp had hurried upstairs after letting Adie out, and now, looking through a broken window, he saw Adie stand talking with the unseen enemy.
"Why doesn't he fire?" said Kemp to himself. Then the revolver moved a little. "That's strange," he said. "Adie has given up the revolver."
"Promise not to charge the door," Adie was saying. "Give me a chance."
"Just go back to the house. I tell you, I'll promise nothing."
Adie seemed to decide suddenly. He turned towards the house and walked slowly with his hands behind him. Kemp watched him. The revolver appeared, a small dark object, following Adie. Then things happened very quickly. Adie jumped at the small object, missed it, threw up his hands and fell forward on his face. A little ball of blue smoke rose into the air. Kemp did not hear the sound of the shot. Adie raised himself on one arm, fell forward, and lay still. For a time, Kemp remained looking at Adie as he lay peacefully on the grass. The day was very hot and still. Nothing seemed to move. Adie lay on the grass near the gate. The curtains of all the houses down the hill road were drawn, but in one little green garden hut was a white figure, rather like an old man asleep. Kemp's eyes returned to Adie. The game was not beginning well. Then came a ringing and a knocking at the front door, but nobody opened it. Silence followed. Kemp sat listening, and then began to look carefully out of the 3 windows, one after another. He went to the stairs and stood listening anxiously. What was his enemy doing? Suddenly there was a banging from below. He waited and went down the stairs again. The house was filled with the sound of heavy blows and breaking wood. He went into the kitchen. The door was being broken down with an axe. Kemp went back into the passage, trying to think. In a moment, the Invisible Man would be in the kitchen. This door would not keep him a moment, and the front doorbell rang again, and Kemp heard voices. It was the policeman with the servant. He ran into the hall, opened the door, and 3 people fell into the house in a pile. Kemp shut the door again. "The Invisible Man," said Kemp. "He has a revolver, with 2 shots left. He's killed Adie. At least, he's shot him. Didn't you see him on the grass? He's lying there." "Who?" said one of the policemen. "Adie," said Kemp. "We came round the back way," said the girl. "What's that banging?" asked one of the policemen. "He's in the kitchen, or will be. He's found an axe." Suddenly the house was full of the sound of the Invisible Man's blows on the kitchen door. The girl stared towards the kitchen and stepped into the dining room. Kemp tried to explain in broken sentences. They heard the kitchen door breaking open. "This way!" cried Kemp, and he pushed the policeman into the dining room doorway. "The pokers," said Kemp, and rushed to the fire. He handed a poker to each of the policemen. He suddenly threw himself backwards. "Whoop!" said one policeman, jumped to one side and caught the axe on his poker. The revolver cracked and shot a hole in a picture. The second policeman brought his poker down on the little weapon and sent it to the floor.
The axe went back into the passage. They could hear the invisible man breathing.
"Stand away, you two," he said. "I want that man Kemp."
"We want you," said the first policeman, taking a quick step forward and striking with his poker at the voice. The invisible man must have stepped back and fallen over a chair. Then, as the policeman went after him, the invisible man returned and struck him down. But the second policeman, aiming behind the axe with his poker, hit something soft that cracked. There was a sharp cry of pain, and then the axe fell to the ground. The policeman struck again at emptiness and hit nothing. He put his foot on the axe and struck again. Then he stood, holding the poker, listening for the slightest movement. He heard a window open, and a quick rush of feet outside. His companion rolled over and sat up, with blood running down between his eye and ear.
"Where is he?"
asked the man on the floor.
"I don't know. I've hit him. He's standing somewhere in the hall, unless he's slipped past you. Dr. Kemp! Sir! Dr. Kemp!"
cried the policeman again. The second policeman began struggling to his feet. He stood up. Suddenly, the faint sound of bare feet could be heard.
"Whoop!" cried the first policeman, and threw his poker.
He started to go after the invisible man. Then he changed his mind and stepped into the dining room.
"Dr. Kemp!"
he began. The dining room window was wide open, and neither servant nor Kemp was to be seen. Chapter 22. The Hunter Hunted. Kemp had set off running to save his life, as he had seen Mr. Marvel run down the hill road. Never, he thought, had he seemed to run so slowly. People looked at him. They saw fear in his face. Now he was rushing to the town below, where people were standing or walking in groups. He slowed down, and then heard rapid footsteps behind.
"The invisible man!"
he cried. He thought of going into the police station, but changed his mind, turned down a side street, and then into a yard, into a little house, and so back into the main road. A crowd had collected in the street. There was a noise of running feet. A big man, a few yards away, was swinging a heavy spade, striking at something. Another man came out of a shop with a thick stick in his hand.
"Spread out! Spread out!"
cried someone. Kemp stopped and looked round, breathing heavily.
"He's close," he cried. "Form a line across."
He was hit hard under the ear and tried to turn round towards his unseen enemy. Then he was hit again under the jaw and fell to the ground. In another moment a knee was digging into his chest and hands held his throat, but one hand was weaker than the other. Then the spade of the big man came through the air above him and struck something. He felt warm blood on his face. The hold on his throat was loosened, and Kemp rolled on top of his enemy.
"I've got him!" cried Kemp. "Help! Help! Hold him! He's down! Hold his feet!"
In another second there was a rush of people to the struggle. There was no shouting after Kemp's cry, only a sound of blows and feet and heavy breathing. Then the invisible man got to his feet. Kemp still held his legs. Then someone got hold of his neck and pulled him back. Down went the pile of struggling, kicking men again. Then suddenly came a wild cry that died away into silence.
"Get back!" cried Kemp. "He's hurt! I tell you, stand back!"
A doctor was feeling the unseen body. "The mouth is all wet," he said. He stood up quickly, and then knelt down on the ground by the side of the unseen thing. More people joined the pushing crowd. Men were coming out of the houses. The doors of the inn stood wide open. Very little was said. Kemp felt around him. His hand seemed to pass through empty air. "He's not breathing," he said, and then, "I cannot feel his heart. His side. An old woman, looking under the arm of the big man with a spade, cried out. "Look there!" she said, and pointed. And looking where she pointed, everyone saw a shadowy, cloudy body. At first they could see through it, but it was becoming more solid every moment. "Hullo!" cried the policeman. "Here are his feet showing." And so, slowly, beginning at his hands and feet, and spreading slowly to the centre of his body, that strange change continued. It was like the slow movement of a poison. They saw the glassy bones, then the flesh and skin, misty at first, but slowly growing thicker and harder and more solid. Soon they could see his chest and his shoulders and the faint shape of his face. When at last the crowd made way for Kemp to stand back, there lay the bare and broken body of a young man of about 30. His hair was white, not grey with age, but white as snow, and his eyes were bright like jewels. His expression was one of anger and fear.
"Cover his face!" cried a man. "In God's name, cover that face!"
Someone brought a sheet. They covered him and carried him into the inn. And there it was, on a bed in an ill-lighted bedroom, among a crowd of excited people, that Griffin, the first of all men to make himself invisible, ended his strange and terrible life.